Thank you very much. Questions?
Why a private member's bill? If there's this level of support not only within communities and this group of organizations that you have on your release, but within government as well, does this seem like the best way to move this legislation forward?
Well, I think private members' bill are effective tool. I've used them always quite effectively in the past. I think that it does a couple of things. One, of course, it heightens the level of debate on a particular issue, and this is a complicated issue, and I think there needs to be a significant education that needs to be done, and by tabling a private member's bill and through your coverage, hopefully we will accomplish that. Secondly, I think in a minority government setting, private members' bills have become even more important, and I think we're seeing that substantive private members' bill are working through the legislative process, are turning into law, and I'm confident this will be one of them.
Is there anywhere written into the legislation how exactly a SLAPP lawsuit is identified? Because I'm sure that some people might be able to say that it wouldn't be or that it would be, and that might, identifying which one might actually take up a lot of time at the beginning.
Absolutely. The key definition that the advisory panel that provided, which is incorporated in this legislation, is that the communication or conduct that we're dealing with is of public interest. Of course, that is to be defined and could have broader meaning, but we see that on a regular basis where communities will get involved in issues which are local in nature and have a significant public interest, has an impact on their neighborhood or their community, and those are the kind of things that are covered within this legislation. You have to be mindful. Nobody is saying you cannot bring lawsuits. Of course, legitimate lawsuits are part and parcel of our democratic legal justice system. But when lawsuits are being brought forward, which are meritless or frivolous in nature, and the sole purpose is to silence a community because they oppose a particular project or some sort of an entity, those are the kind of things are not helping anyone. And there's just a blunt tool that is being used to silence discourse. And that's what this particular bill aims to prevent.
You mentioned that SLAPP lawsuits are on the rise in Ontario. Do you have any idea of how many annually have been identified?
Well, it's obviously difficult to evaluate it because we don't define them as such. Because right now we don't have any legislation which deals with anti-SLAPP measures. But I think we hear quite a few stories about them. In my course over the year or so that I've been working on this initiative, I've spoken to a lot of people from different parts of the province who have described what sounds like a SLAPP. And as I mentioned, I've had very specific instances in my community in Ottawa Centre where this was a real motivation or cause behind a lawsuit.
Can you give me a local example from your riding, but also perhaps one of the more sort of egregious examples in the province?
Yeah, I'll give you a very example that I speak about quite often, actually, because it really highlights the absurdity behind SLAPP. I have a constituent who actually, when I spoke about this on Friday in my riding in Ottawa Centre, Mr. Galpin, Albert Galpin, he came actually to the press conference and was very happy that I'm bringing this legislation forward. Albert Galpin, who's a respectable civil servant, lives in the riding of Ottawa Centre, started advocating the federal government around the location of a parole office. So federal government has a guideline which says that parole offices be from a certain radius from local schools. Well, in my riding, they did not follow their own parameter. So Mr. Galpin started advocating to the federal government saying, follow your own rules. Took him a while. Finally, Correction Services Canada said, yeah, you're right, we didn't follow our rule, and announced that they will be moving that particular parole office. The result was that the landlord where the parole office was located, was a private entity, brought a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against my constituent, Mr. Galpin, on the grounds that he he caused economic interference, that his advocacy, which is purely in public interest, which is purely to remind government to follow their own rules, caused him economic harm. It took Mr. Galpin to fight that case 2.5 years. It went all the way to Court of Appeal. He was successful in the end of the day, but it cost him thousands of dollars, not to mention the stress. So here's a very specific example where if this type of legislation would have had existed in our laws, hopefully we would have been able to get rid of that lawsuit in a couple of month time frame. So just this is, I think, something that really resonated with me when he brought this issue to my attention several years ago when he was going through the ordeal.
A lot of the organizations you have on your release are by and large, a lot of environmental organizations. Is this exclusively an environmental sort of issue, or is it primarily an environmental sort of issue?
I think I just gave you an example which is not environmental in nature at all. I think where we've seen the most use of SLAP type lawsuits are within environmental violation framework, and some of our friends who are here from various environmental associations will be able to speak to you more in detail on the nature of those suits. But I think they are not limited to that nature. But I do give my hats off to the environmental groups, NGOs in Ontario for raising this issue and advocating it in such an effective manner that we've got our private members bill here today in Ontario. You know, communities, citizens they engage with government or other public entities, all levels of government, or on issues that are of public interest in all areas, and the scope obviously covers everything in this legislation. Well, thank you very much. Again, as I said, I'm very excited to table this bill this afternoon. If you have any questions moving forward, please do not hesitate to contact me at my office here at Queen's Park. Thank you.